We are the restaurant brokers, and we sell restaurants.
We started the nation's largest restaurant brokerage firm over a decade ago.
Atlanta, Georgia was our starting point, but our brand is spreading nationwide. We define restaurant brokerage and help buyers just like these.
Our dream, our goal, open up a restaurant, loving life, serving people breakfast and lunch, and then enjoying the rest of the day with them and ourselves.
Buying an existing restaurant, leasing a closed restaurant space, or purchasing a restaurant franchise. We help buyers satisfy their appetite for acquisition.
I'm part of a husband and wife team with this fella.
Working with my wife has been a lot of fun. The ultimate goal for everybody here is to make this work. And because we have different strengths, we bring different angles to the deal.
The process begins with our powerhouse website, WeSellRestaurants.com, where buyers sign online confidentiality agreements and browse restaurants for sale.
Then we send buyers undercover to check out a restaurant and decide if it's the right one for them.
Buyers get our proprietary business analysis tool with all the financial details on the business for sale.
After studying the restaurant inside and out, it's back to our office.
We're deal makers. We write contracts and negotiate terms for buyers and sellers. That's why we sell more restaurants than any other firm in the nation. We are the restaurant brokers. Our name says it all.
I'm Robin Gagnon.
And I'm Eric Gagnon, and we sell restaurants. We started the nation's largest restaurant brokerage firm, We Sell Restaurants, over a decade ago. You can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com.
We are on your radio once a week with the leading authorities in the restaurant industry, talking about subjects trending in the restaurant business. Tweet your own questions while we're on the air. You can catch us on our Twitter handle @SellRestaurants. Post to our Facebook page, facebook.com/WeSellRestaurants. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up on our social media channels.
Our goal is to satisfy your appetite for acquisition, feed the need for restaurant reality, and serve up a recipe for business success. If you have any ideas or any comments for our show, feel free to send me an email. My email is Eric, E-R-I-C, @WeSellRestaurants.com.
Today we are talking about why the written word can have such a powerful impact on the restaurant business. Whether it's a columnist or a blogger, we're talking with guests who have passion for food and discuss how they are influencing the restaurant scene. Our first guest today is Amy Riolo. As an award-winning author, chef, television personality, cuisine and culture expert, also an educator, Amy frequently makes appearances on television and radio programs in the U.S. and abroad, including Fox TV, CBS Montgomery, Fairfax County TV, Nile TV, the Travel Channel, Martha Stewart Living Radio, and even looks like television overseas. Amy created and appeared in 90-second cooking videos entitled Culture of Cuisine. She's a culinary advisor for the Mediterranean Food Alliance. Her work has appeared in numerous print media, including USA Today, Cooking Light Magazine, The Washington Post, CNN.com, The Wall Street Journal, and many more. She's also the author of a noted culinary cultural blog called amyriolo.blogspot.com. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning. And we're also joined today by Ari LeVaux, who writes Flash in the Pan, a nationally syndicated weekly food columns that appear in more than 50 newspapers in 25 states, and is a restaurant critic in Albuquerque for the Weekly Alibi. Flash in the Pan also regularly appears in Atlantic.com, Alternates, Slate, Civil Eats, and other online publications. Ari, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Okay, and our third guest is Matthew Robinson. Matthew spent almost 2 decades in the food industry as a scientist, product developer, and spokesperson for the industry, interpreting the complexities of various topics into easy and usable information. He innovates every day, creating wow moments in the kitchen and beyond. He has a Master of Science degree from the University of Georgia and a diploma from the Professionary Culinary Program at the French Culinary Institute in New York City. He is the founder of X-Claim International, a nutrition, science, and claim strategy consultancy that helps clients turn the complexities of science and new innovations into communications that are compelling and beneficial to the consumer and healthcare professional. He is also the creator of the Culinary Exchange website and blog. Oh yes, he's also published a pretty incredible book, Knickerbocker Glory, A Chef's Guide to Innovation in the Kitchen and Beyond. Matthew spends a great deal of time innovating both in and out of the kitchen, Because his passion is food, he has eaten his way across Europe for the past 8 years. Matthew, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so everyone here is in sort of that area of new media, online media, whether it's as a blogger or a critic or releasing their own ideas. Let's start, Amy, we'll start with you. Tell us how you got started and what drew you to the food industry as a specialty.
Sure. Well, I started in 2009. I actually started my blog in 2009. I started releasing books in 2007, and my first editor said, you should have a blog. All authors should have a blog. And at that time, my image of a blog was somebody who was living a life that we wanted to live vicariously. And I was living in suburban Maryland, and I said, I don't think my trips to the grocery store are as exciting as people who live in Montmartre in Paris or somewhere like that. And she said, yes, but, you seem to be doing a lot of cultural events. You're always with diplomats and different people, and you're traveling, and you have this great cultural background. So she said, why don't you start a blog that kind of highlights that and lets people know, what it's like to interact with so many different cultures. So that's how I got started, and I've been doing it ever since. When I first started, my blog was called Dining with Diplomats, and it was specifically about going to different embassies in Washington, D.C., working with the chefs, working with the ambassadors, and talking about how they interpret their cuisine here in America. But as my career as an author took off and I started traveling around for book fairs and different ministries of culture would invite me to their country for culinary events, so I started talking about those, and then it shifted focus. So now I'm really about
Good. That's very interesting. How about you, Ari? How did that come about for you to become a blogger?
Well, the blog actually started as an outlet, a place for me to put my weekly column after I'd written it so that editors who I work with could go visit it and find something to fill space in a pinch. And then I just kind of made it available for the public. And I do get lots of public, hits from people who are not editors at my blog. But in a lot of ways, the online community is kind of the, I don't want to say the enemy, but as a restaurant critic, and where my other hat is a restaurant critic here in Albuquerque, sites like Yelp, Urban Spoon are a little bit of the competition to me. So I have kind of a love-hate relationship with the internet. I'm straddling two worlds, 1 foot in the print world and 1 foot online.
See, I love that, and I think that's what's really sort of the impetus for this show for us to talk about, because there is this sort of clash of the titans between an online presence and the restaurateurs face it as well. The real-life customers that come in and give them high fives and lots of love and say you're the greatest place on earth, and then the guy who goes and vents on Yelp. So I think it is that sort of clash between the virtual and the actual that we want to even get more into. So, Matthew, tell us a little bit about how you got started in this business.
Yeah, well, I started as a nutrition scientist, and it really hit me that it is about the nutrition, but it's really more about the food and how people eat and how people need help eating, whether it's simply getting dinner on the table or better understanding ingredients. And so I went to culinary school to follow that path. And then I also realized that, look, folks need help creating new things, whether it be in the kitchen or outside of the kitchen. And I wanted to create a very approachable guide to innovation, and that's why I ultimately did blogging and put the spin on and created Knickerbocker Glory, which is simply a guide to innovation for everyone to use. That's how it happened, really.
That's very interesting, and I want to come back a little bit to what Ari just talked about. Over the years, blogging has evolved, and in the past used to be the restaurant critics, and now you watch reality TV and you can see the judges, the ultimate, I guess critics on your food for that day, that week. And when that evolves now, how does restaurateurs are feeling about when bloggers come versus a restaurant critic or versus even judges in these shows? But I mean, what have you seen as far as different perception from the restaurants, bloggers versus old-fashioned restaurant critics? Amy, you want to get us started?
Sure. Well, I think there's a big difference. First of all, the lines are blurred with blogging about the etiquette of going to restaurants, and different people have kind of different criteria. You know, critics usually go kind of incognito, unannounced. They don't like to have anybody know who they are and just kind of rate at random. Whereas bloggers, a lot of them will call up the restaurant and say, hey, I'm coming, I want to feature this type of food, or could you do this dish for me? And so the restaurants usually have a heads up, and they can kind of partner with the bloggers a little bit more to, you know, put out whatever idea they would like to promote. They can really use the bloggers to that advantage. Not everybody. Some of them that are more strict critics follow those old school kind of rules, but a lot of the newer people don't do that. And so it's a great opportunity for the restaurants to say, hey, you know, this is what we would like to talk about. This is what we'd like to focus on. As long as you're coming in, let's pair together. And they can use the demographics that the blogger has for a following too to focus on that particular area of their business. Okay, good answer. And Matthew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think restaurants will have a love-hate relationship with bloggers as well. I mean, we've seen in California where restaurateurs trying to get legislation to sort of stop bloggers from saying nasty things about their restaurant. But I actually think that this is going to be, if it's not already, sort of the start of what will be very healthy relationships, because these bloggers will keep the restaurateurs on their toes and keep them creating delighters for their customers, keep them fresh and keep them innovating and keep people coming to their restaurants. So I think it's you know, they're going to end up having to love them. And I think unfortunately from sort of a restaurant critic perspective, I mean, we see I think newspapers and things like that, they're going away. So, you know, bloggers are it, and bloggers are now, and bloggers are the future. Ari, what do you think about this? I want to hear from you now.
Yeah, well, that's definitely an interesting question, whether or not newspapers are going away. I don't have a crystal ball. I sure hope not. But I will say that I do use bloggers a lot. You know, when I'm interested in checking out a place, I'll read some of the online reviews, and as Amy said, of course, I go incognito, so I don't announce my presence when I go to review a place. But yeah, with blogging, the rules are different, and they're just kind of, you know, the rules are being made up as we go. So it's kind of a wild west right now, and you know, nobody really knows exactly what to do. You know, I see a lot of restaurateurs interacting with bloggers on Yelp or Urban Spoon, basically addressing comments, and that usually doesn't end well.
Right.
For the restaurateurs, you know, they don't often, especially if they're addressing negative criticism, you know, it's really hard to do that and come off well unless you just take a very kind of humble thank you for your comment, you know, we'll look into that. But if they try to argue with the bloggers, you know, forget it. It can get ugly real fast. So, you know, I'm not sure, you know, there isn't really a roadmap for the restaurateur side, at least what I've seen on how to handle that. So I think a lot of them are just kind of like deer in headlights at this point.
I agree that it is sort of the Wild West out there, and I think there are some legislative attempts out there and even rulemaking within the restaurants, because I read online that some restaurants will not allow you to take photos of the food because they are concerned that people are just snapping away, you know, these instant photos and sticking them on Pinterest or Instagram or whatever, and it doesn't put their food in the best light. And they want to make sure that the really gorgeous presentation and everything they've slaved over goes out online in the best and most possible. But it's almost like you're trying to stuff a genie back in a bottle. I don't think that's actually going to make for a long-term solution. And I think this will ultimately have to be sorted out between the restaurants, the public, the bloggers, and then those real live restaurant critics. What do you guys think? Who wants to weigh in first?
Matthew?
Yeah, at first I didn't mean to scare Ari by saying that the newspapers might be going away. That was my intent. But look, this is I think the biggest opportunity for restaurateurs to embrace this. And when they do, it's going to be great. Because by saying you can't take pictures and by saying you can't do all these things, it's just creating tension. And that's not what that's not going to be good for anybody. And as Ari suggested, it never seems to end well for the restaurateur. This is a huge opportunity. This could be a huge inspiration to take restaurants to a new space, a new place, a new way to run, a new way to be. This could be the root of an immense amount of innovation.
Sure. Amy, you want to chime in on that a little bit?
I agree. Yeah, I agree with what Matthew said. You know, it's to say not to take pictures, it really doesn't matter. I don't think when people look at blogging or they look at columns, they're as worried about the pictures. They're worried about what the person has to say, and that all depends upon their experience. So, you know, it's the restaurant's job to give people a great experience, regardless of the price point or what type of restaurant they are. So if they give a great experience, people are generally going to write about that, and there will always be a little bit of negativity, or maybe somebody had a bad day, or they're just against something, but it's word of mouth amplified. So it's just a bigger scale of what we were always dealing with. And I think that, you know, to take pictures is wonderful, and people should be honored that their food is represented.
So I'm a huge fan of a lot of different blogs, and I return to some of them again and again for recipe ideas. And I know a lot of folks do, and they go to Pinterest and different places. So do you guys believe that there's competition within the virtual world and the real world for ideas for certain dishes or restaurants? How would you weigh in on that? Ari, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, could I first just back up and say one thing about the online reviews that I didn't get to mention, and that is, you know, I think the restaurateurs are, I think, right in that something is kind of amiss when anybody, you know, with a laptop can go in and, you know, post some negative reviews, which, you know, may or may not be true, and have that create a huge impact on their business. So I have no idea what the answer to that is, but, you know, I feel for them in that respect, and I also feel for them, you know, as far as taking pictures. You know, I do believe that people should be able to take pictures of the food. I don't do it when I'm reviewing. I don't want to attract attention to myself. But, you know, I mean, it's hard to take a good picture of a half-eaten hamburger. You know, that's not going to look good to anybody except maybe the person who ate the first half.
Right.
And that's maybe. So, you know, it's tough. It's tough out there. As far as the question between about recipes in the virtual world and the real world, I didn't quite actually understand that. Could you?
Oh, sure. What I'm saying is there are so many people. It's kind of like the same thing with the bloggers. They're not necessarily restaurant critics. It's just someone who now has a blog, so they go in and they give opinions on restaurants. Well, by the same token, there are a lot of people that blog, and their blog full-time is just putting forward recipes and ideas. And, you know, is there actual competition between the virtual world and the real world in terms of innovation and coming up? Because there are, you know, for example, there are very few brick and mortar restaurants that may be devoted 100%. Sure, there are some, but 100%, for example, to vegan, or 100% to those with celiac. But there are definitely blogs and people that post a recipe every single day just focused on that very, very narrow niche. So does it actually draw the customer away from visiting the real world store and just keep them at home, you know, taking advantage of all these other culinary opportunities available to them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree for sure. I mean, there's so many amazing recipes out there. I may work for the newspapers, but I read blogs all the time, and the amount of information out there is just incredible. So absolutely, you know, it's not all the recipes are going to come out the way you hoped, and you know, by the same token, anyone can just throw up a recipe and you know, get some people into trouble in the kitchen if they didn't test it themselves first, or you know, or if it's just not a good recipe. But there's certainly a lot of opportunities out there for people to learn to cook just by surfing online.
Matthew, would you like to chime in, especially with your food scientist background?
I think there's a very interesting dynamic on the web amongst bloggers, and I do think that there is some part competition because everybody wants to have their story told. But I also think because the internet has this sort of DNA of sharing, what's become is this big virtuous cycle. Bloggers reading bloggers and saying, wow, that's really good. here's how I can make it even better. Here's how I can add something to the story, that whether it be celiac, amongst the niches, I still think there's a lot of sharing and a lot of, it's like a blogger brotherhood, really. But I do think that it is more of a dynamic where it's more sharing and more a virtuous cycle of building something great without sniping at each other or trying to undercut someone.
Great. And Amy, same.
I think that they're great for creating trends and really kind of pushing the limit to what's next. Blogs can do that successfully and kind of test things out for restaurants, because at the end of the day, restaurants have to serve what people like and what they're willing to try. So maybe people don't know something yet, but the bloggers can kind of get the word out, make something trending, make people curious, and then they would go to a restaurant to try it. I don't see blog recipes being a threat to restaurants in terms of people saying, I'm just going to stay home and cook this now because I have the recipe. I wish that were the problem. I'm all about, empowering home cooks and getting people back in the kitchen. And so many people are intimidated by the kitchen. And as Matthew was saying, there's all of this information out there, and we really our job is to cull it and to say to our specific audience, this is what's important, this is what you need to look for, this is what's nutritious, this is what the new trend is. So we can kind of guide that, and then once it's available, people can go to restaurants and look for that, and the chefs and the restaurateurs can look to bloggers for these new ideas and for recipes. And as both Matthew and Ari mentioned, a lot of the recipes on blogs, unfortunately, are not tested. As an author with most publishing houses, it's required that you test your recipes. Some are more stringent than others, and they have to come out, and usually you have professional recipe testers. But with blogs, a lot of times people will just copy something from another place or write down something from memory, and it might not be accurate. So I do recommend people, unless it's a really trustworthy one where there's a lot of ratings, I would recommend that people don't try something out for the first time. When they're having guests or company, you should definitely make sure you know that recipe before serving it, because it may not come out. It may be a great idea, and it might look pretty. A lot of food bloggers start out as stylists or photographers, and so the picture can look great, but the recipe itself might not be perfect.
Okay, so we are kind of circling back to that idea of the wild, wild west. There's really no controls. I'm reminded of that commercial where somebody ultimately says, oh, he was a French model online, and I saw it on the internet. It's not all what it may be cracked up to be when you're just surfing and find a pretty blog. And I think, Matthew, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think what Amy said was quite interesting, actually, about bloggers creating markets. I think that's really interesting. And, from a sort of competition perspective, I think we need to look at the surveys that say, look, folks want to spend 15 minutes in the kitchen, and that's it. I don't think restaurants necessarily need to, be threatened. Now, in terms of it all being sort of Wild West, people are going to have to go do their research and be part of the conversation so they can see what bloggers are being truthful and genuine and meet their needs, and then move on, or engage or don't engage. Because, there is a lot of sort of bunk out there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think one thing is the restaurants, not only the cooking part of it, is the experience of the service and everything that goes along with it, and the decor, the atmosphere, and you can't recreate that in your kitchen, especially when you've been slaving away for an hour, in front of that dish, and it doesn't turn out when you want it to be. Guys, I think we're going to come up to a break, and after the break, I want to talk to you guys about how do we get these restaurateurs to respond to this new Wild West. So I'm going to let Robin take us to the break, and we'll continue after.
Okay, so you are on the air with Eric and Robin Gagnon. We're the Restaurant Brokers. Want to remind everyone you can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com. Take a moment, like us on our Facebook page. It's Facebook.com/WeSellRestaurants. You can follow us on Twitter. We always have a lot of conversations going on out there. Our Twitter handle is @SellRestaurants. We Sell Restaurants is your industry authority for source and resource for information. We are the Restaurant Brokers. Eric and Robin Gagnon will be right back after this short timeout.